Hey everyone, it's Roger with Kinsta. I hope everybody's doing well. I'm joined today by my good friend Tim Kelsey from Pronto Marketing. Hey Tim, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on today, Roger.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you. Today we're talking about mastering remote hiring strategies for digital agencies. And the reason that Tim, I've got you on here is because you're an expert at this, having built your agency, Pronto, and I really just want to, I'm excited to kind of hear how you managed to build your remote and offshoring team and kind of get into the nitty gritty details. I guess the best thing to do though is let's back up and introduce who's Tim Kelsey and who's Pronto Marketing.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm the managing director of Pronto Marketing, and I don't know, I guess I'd like to say I'm an accidental marketer, but in some ways, I never really intended to get into digital marketing. It just sort of happened. I studied music at university, but then kind of got wrapped into Pronto. I'll tell the whole Pronto story as well. It sort of blends with my story because I've been a part of Pronto for so long now. But kind of fell into marketing, loved it, and have really focused on it for the past 14, 15 years now. And the agency has grown pretty well, and I've grown it as a leader and a manager and a marketer all along the way that time as well. But yeah, like I said, my story is really interconnected with the whole Pronto marketing story. So I can give maybe a quick history lesson on how Pronto got started and how we got to where we are today. The company was originally founded by a father and son team, Derek and Corey Brown. And I guess the most notable thing, and sort of what you were alluding to as to why I'm an expert in offshore international hiring, is that we're based in Thailand. And that came about because Derek moved out to Thailand maybe like 20 years ago or something while he was working for Microsoft. He was a marketing executive at Microsoft for many years, but got tired of the big corporate life and wanted his own place to work where he could set the rules and hire who he wanted and have the culture that he wanted. So he started Pronto Marketing, and his son flew over to Thailand to help him run the business. And I went to college with his son. He's one of my best friends. So he quickly roped me into coming out here. And I was in my 20s looking for a little adventure and thought I would move to Thailand for a year. And that was 15 years ago now. So that was my little adventure got extended quite a bit. Um, but yeah, we didn't pick Thailand for any particular strategic reason. It just sort of, Derek was here, loved Thailand, and wanted to stay here. And that's why we got started. But I've learned a lot from hiring locally in Thailand. About 6 years ago, we started hiring in the Philippines as well, and now about 30% of our staff is based in the Philippines. And just in the last year, we've also started expanding to Central and South America. So I've gone through multiple layers of hiring in different stages in different areas, learning all the things that go along with overcoming cultural differences and time zones and all those things that are like really big challenges for agency owners as they start to explore hiring overseas and sort of offshoring their team in some ways. So yeah, we never really intended, I mean, I think Derek's vision of Pronto when he started the company was maybe 10 people would be working for him, and he'd just have this little agency until he retired. But we have just under 100 people now. We have about 1,000 customers. Most of our customers are in North America, so US and Canada, but the rest are spread out across English-speaking markets around the world. So it got much bigger than we intended, but it's been a really fun 15 years of growing and changing and learning new things and overcoming a lot of those challenges that come with being a remote first company and an offshore team as well.
Absolutely. That's a fascinating background story. It's very interesting to hear, how you ended up in Thailand and then how it's grown since then. Kind of digging in before we start getting into all the remote hiring stuff, what kind of marketing is Pronto doing for your clients?
Sure. So we have sort of three big areas that we focus on. One is building WordPress websites. So everything that we do related to websites is done via WordPress. So if someone comes in, wants a full refresh or a brand new site, we'll build that for them. Then the next big section of our department of our work is supporting and maintaining and hosting those websites. So once we've built them, they transition onto one of our monthly support plans. And that's been sort of the core of our business from the very beginning. We always wanted to get people onto these recurring plans, paying monthly fees. We're charging credit cards every month and don't have to worry about chasing down invoices or anything like that. So that's been our bread and butter since the very beginning. Our first plans were always super focused on get that monthly recurring revenue. And then about 8 or 9 years ago, we started expanding into a few marketing services, SEO and content marketing in particular. So those are the three big areas that we focus on. And just in the last year and a half, we've also started offering all of those services on a white label basis to other agencies as well. So that's our newest venture of expanding things, is not just doing it for small businesses that come our way, but any agencies that need help or want to leverage all the offshore team members that we have without the stress of having to go through all the things we're about to talk about and the challenges that come along with hiring that team yourself.
Excellent. And so you mentioned there small businesses. So would you say that the majority of your clientele is the small business area?
Yeah, definitely. We like to say our sweet spot is a business that has, or businesses that have between 0 and 3 in-house marketers. So sort of once they get above 3 in-house marketers, they're probably too big. They have a web guy in-house. They don't have as much of a need for us. But if they're anywhere from a solo entrepreneur to a 20, 30 person team that maybe has one in-house marketing manager, we work great with people like that because that marketing manager tends to be spread so thin across all the different marketing activities that they need to do, and maybe isn't an expert in web development or infrastructure and hosting or running an SEO campaign. So we can come in and fill in those areas where that in-house marketer doesn't have all the capabilities or knowledge that might be needed in certain areas.
Excellent. So yeah, that lays, I think, the course very well for what we're going to dive into now, is talking about building this remote and offshore team. And, I guess the first thing maybe to kind of hit on is understanding the benefits of hiring remote workers. Where do you see utilizing this method of working with people as really a benefit for your agency?
Yeah, I think there's a few different areas that you can find some benefits with offshore workers. I think the most obvious one, and the thing that drives people to look for offshore hires, is keeping costs under control. So you'll find more affordable salaries for people in Southeast Asia or Central and South America. South Africa and Eastern Europe are all also popular areas to hire offshore workers. So I think that's the initial thing that kind of drives people. If they're looking to hire someone locally and they go, oh wow, can we really afford this salary for this person? And so they start exploring other markets around the world. But I think there's a couple different benefits on top of that. One is that it greatly broadens the talent pool that you are now looking at. Instead of hiring just within your local metro area or even just within the United States, you're now looking globally, and especially in roles where it might be hard to find specialized knowledge or someone who just happens to be within commuting distance of your office, you now have all these new options and new candidates. So you can really search for the best of the best and still be able to find them at an affordable rate compared to what you might find locally. And then the other big benefit, I think, is being able to build a 24/7 support staff. Especially if you have clients in multiple countries around the world, you can avoid that. I mean, I've seen it on lots of agencies. They'll set expectations of we are available during these hours, and if you have an emergency outside of those hours, kind of tough luck. So if you have someone kind of spaced out all throughout the world, now your support shifts kind of shift as the day around the world shifts, and you always have someone available. Even if it's the middle of the night in the US, you have someone on the other side of the globe there to troubleshoot an emergency for one of your customers. And that's when I think you can really impress a customer with the level of customer service you can deliver and how dependable you are, that you were there when they needed you most, and not just an email that they have to kind of, well, did he read it yet? Or like wake up at 6 a.m. It's like, oh, he still hasn't responded yet. No, they get responses within 30 minutes or an hour or whatever it might be. And I think that's when you can win a customer for life. If you saved them in this urgent moment, then you've really gained their trust and gained them as a long-term customer.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting to think about the 24/7 global coverage in a couple of more angles there. At Kinsta, we're 24/7 support. And one of the things that I like to point out to people is we don't do a graveyard shift, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody who's on shift is working a normal, regular daytime shift. They're just on a different part of the globe. And the benefit for the employee is huge, right? I don't know if you've ever worked graveyard shift, but I think I did it a couple of times and it was not pleasant.
Right.
So the employee is happier, but also they're going to do a better job now, right? They're mm-hmm. happy to do the work. One thing that my colleague Alex pointed out yesterday is another benefit is local knowledge. If you're mm-hmm. talking with somebody who's in your time zone, there's a chance that they're going to know a little bit more about what you're talking about, just because, every country's got different supermarkets. We have, just different things, and having somebody who's more regional to you can just help with conversations a lot of the time.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree on sort of the graveyard shift stuff. That's exactly why we've started hiring in Central and South America, mm-hmm. is that we originally had a graveyard shift in the Philippines. Mm-hmm. There's a whole work culture around working the graveyard shift there. There's a lot of huge call centers in the Philippines, and there's a support system around it, food delivery, 24-hour restaurants, all that kind of stuff. But after a couple of years of doing that, our team members will come to us and say, I really can't do this anymore. I want my life back. I want to be able to sleep normal hours. So people can put up with it, but it's really hard to commit to that lifestyle long term. And so we've started hiring in Central and South America so that we can start transitioning some of our graveyard shift Philippines team members to daytime hours. And then just, like you said, everybody's happier and more productive because it's not the middle of the night and they're just barely getting by on their fourth cup of coffee trying to stay awake for their shift.
Absolutely. And they have a relationship with, the normal people in their life who live in the daytime. So fascinating. It's always interesting to hear different challenges and ways that companies are resolving them. So, there's some of the benefits for it. So now, moving into challenges and solutions, I think maybe this is really the meat of what we want to talk about today is, there's some obvious challenges to all of this, and the solutions are going to be very unique, and I'm excited to hear how Pronto has addressed some of the different challenges involved with remote and offshore hiring.
Yeah, I think probably the first challenge that people find is just finding a reliable hire. Say it's their very first person they're hiring in the Philippines or somewhere else around the world and kind of have no context for what you should be looking for, or you're used to working on certain job database sites and now you got to figure out what are the local ones and all this kind of stuff. And then you go through interviews and it's sometimes hard to tell, is this really the right person? Do they have the right skills that I need? And partly that's because you're doing this remote interview, partly because it's a different culture that you're talking to, and partly it's because you're not really sure what the expectations should be when you're hiring someone from overseas. Like, should you have slightly lower expectations because they're getting a lower salary than someone in the US might be getting? So all of those things, I think, add up to a lot of confusion and doubt that goes into that initial job search process. And I know a lot of agency owners who have been burned and hired someone that they thought was going to be great, and then they just sort of take off and disappear on them, and they get this sort of bad taste in their mouth and go, okay, well, I'm just not going to try offshore hiring anymore. It didn't work for me. I think there's a few things that can be done to overcome that, and especially with thinking about your first hire and how you approach it. One is that you have to go into this with the mindset that the person you're hiring is going to be a full team member and not just an outsourced freelancer that you have on the other side of the world. That's one of the common things I've seen when I've talked to agency owners who have struggled with this, is they'll say, oh yeah, my guy in South America, or my gal over in the Philippines. And I'm like, well, is that just your guy over in the Philippines, or is that your team member that you've brought on board? And I think they've gone into it with this mindset of, this is just the person that works for me, and I have a little contract with them and send them money, but they haven't been brought on board as a team member. So I think that's step one, is go in with that mindset that you're really looking for a team member, and then structure your interview process in a way that you would for a normal team member. We often have our candidates start with a video introduction of themselves so that we get to see them on video and how they talk. Do they have full command of English, and all these kinds of things that you want to know when you're hiring overseas. So that gives you a quick glance at them. But then we actually have a pretty intensive interview process where they get interviewed by our technical team, or whatever team that they'll be on. Do they have all the right technical knowledge? They'll have a little test that they have to do. And then we'll have a sort of culture fit interview as well. So someone who's not on that team, oftentimes it's me, we'll have someone who's not directly related to that team interview that person as well. Because, sometimes that direct manager, the hiring manager, might be desperate and say, I really need help right now, and they overlook some red flags. So we have someone who's not feeling that desperation come in and say, okay, did you miss anything here that we should actually be concerned about and want to take a second look at? I think oftentimes it's that desperation that gets people into trouble. They hire too quickly. And you want to take, especially when you're hiring overseas, I think you want to take a little more time to really get to know that person. You should be doing multiple calls and sort of building a little bit of a rapport and trust with them, so that you do feel confident they're going to come on board and know what they're doing, and at least be dependable and there when you need them to do the work that they're doing. And I think one tip on top of that I think is important as well is to think about how you're presenting your agency as well. That an interview is a two-way street, especially for the best candidates. I think it's really easy to fall into the trap of, I'm interviewing you, and like you're here to impress me. I'm the one who's going to hire you, and it's all one way because you want a job. But actually, you want an employee as well, and the best candidates are going to get multiple job offers. So you want to be able to say, here's what our culture is like, here's how we treat our team members once they're on board, and you're gonna come on board and be a full team member, even though you're on the other side of the world. And I think that's the kind of thing that then takes that high performing candidate who might be considering multiple offers and saying, okay, I really like the culture of this place, and I'd rather work here than any of the other offers that I've gotten.
Absolutely. So, from backing up a little bit, this 0 to 1 seems to be like maybe the biggest challenge, where it's the first time you need to figure it out. But, from what you're saying, it sounds like a proof of life video, for lack of a better word,
definitely
is a really good start, right? Let's make sure that this person's real. Let's make sure they can articulate themselves in a language that, we can work with. And then, then working through that process and really also making sure that you're removing any emotion from it. Having somebody come in who's not going to directly work with the person and can kind of make sure there's a cultural fit. I think all this mimics a lot of what I've experienced at Kinsta in my tenure here in hiring people, and even if they're local to me, right, or not even local, but somewhere in the U.S. I'm still talking to them through the computer, right? And so I've still got to go through these same motions of, hey, is this a real person? Can they have a conversation and continue thoughts and things along those lines? Really fascinating. Once you get past that first hire and you've found some sort of a groove, how do things change then? Do you work a lot with referrals from existing hires, and do you change your strategy a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I would say one change that I think you have a good hire on board and someone you trust, especially if you're going to hire in that same country again. I think that first offshore team member should be involved in the interview process, because there are some times little cultural nuances that will be over your head, but that they will spot and say, hey, I kind of noticed this. Maybe you should be a little careful. Let's do another interview and question them about it and make sure they really get it, or something along those lines. So it does, once you get the first person on board, it does become a little bit easier because now you have a trusted resource you can depend on and help out with. And 100% on the referrals. That's where we've gotten a lot of our best team members is we've hired someone and then they've said, hey, all my friends, this is a great place to work. You should come apply to Pronto as well. And I think, again, that's where I'll keep repeating this. When you treat your offshore team members as full team members, they really are a part of your team and get the benefits that a regular team member would get and all those sorts of things. That goes a long way to making them feel valued, which is then getting them to the point where they're going to go talk about your agency to their friends and say, this is a really great place to work. I know you're looking for a job. How about you come apply over here? But if you're just treating them like an outsource freelancer, they're not going to be invested in your business or the culture of your business or anything like that. And they're not going to take that step to recommend your business to their friends when they're looking for a job. That's 100%. You should be leveraging referrals wherever you can to bring on more good team members once you've got that solid foundation of a couple initial hires.
Interesting. A lot of this conversation, this parallels the remote and the work from home work culture
Definitely.
that really exploded 4 years ago. And so, in some ways I see you as being ahead of the trend a bit with this work from home and remote culture. Because everything you're saying, like Kinsta is a fully remote company as well. And so everything you're saying, I'm just thinking, wow, this is exactly how we operate is, treated as a full-time employee. There's different legal regulations in different countries around the world. So, who qualifies as what can change. But at the end of the day, when we're working together in Slack or we're on a Google Meet, everybody I'm talking to is a colleague, regardless of where they are. And I think that's really critical. And it's interesting, though, if you roll it all the way back to working in an office, this is really how we should be working with everybody anyway, right? We should be treating everybody as an equal and giving everybody respect and stuff. So
it really is. It really, like, all the advice for having a successful offshore team is just good advice for having a successful team. And the main difference is that you have to put in a little more effort because they're on the other side of the world, there's a different culture, or you have to do things asynchronously because time zones don't match up, or you have to do it over Zoom instead of in person, whatever it might be. So it does take a little bit more effort, but that effort really pays off when you have this happy, satisfied team who's around the world working together and feels like they're a part of something important.
Absolutely. And I think, one thing you've mentioned there is maybe like a linchpin change that people have to, a shift that they need to have mentally is the in-person meetup, right? In order to hire somebody or work with them, it's going out the door a little bit, right? I mean, love meeting up with people in person. I'm going to WordCamp US next week. I'm excited to meet colleagues and friends and vendors and all these things. But the reality is, in order to do my job, I don't have to meet you in person.
Yeah.
And I see, older generations in the workforce still struggling with this change. And I've been at Kinsta for over 4 years. I've met a quarter of the company at this point, maybe a little more than that, in person. And would I like to meet everybody in person? Absolutely, 100%. But in order to do my job and be effective at work, it's not a requirement. And so I think that there's a huge change there. And it sounds like Pronto and you've had no problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, we do also invest in face-to-face visits. Like once a year, we have a company outing and bring everybody together, have a little party, that sort of stuff. But for the most part, everyone's working from home and in separate countries, and we're just talking over Zoom or Slack or whatever it might be. One thing I would say for an agency owner who's just getting to start out hiring offshore, if you get to a point where you've hired 3, 4, 5 people in one country, it might be worth it to go fly out there and say, hey, I want to meet up with you. I think that can go a long way to making them feel like, oh, this person really appreciates me. They came all the way out here to build a stronger relationship with those team members by making that visit. So I think it works fine either way. If you want to be fully remote and do things that way, that's totally fine. And there's ways you can do team building and bonding through all the tools that have come up. We've all gotten a lot more used to it over the last few years. But if you also are that kind of face-to-face person, it's still possible to do it. You have to just get on a long flight to go on the other side of the world. But it can be super rewarding. And your team members, like I've gone to visit our team members in the Philippines a bunch of times, and they're always excited to take me out to lunch or dinner and show me around and have me eat a bunch of Filipino food. And they're just excited to show me around and show me their city and their culture and all that kind of stuff.
Sure, absolutely. Fantastic. All right, so challenges and solutions, we've hit on quite a few there. Ahead, strategies for successful remote hiring.
Mm-hmm.
What are like criteria you're looking at? What kind of tools are you using? Really kind of getting into the nuts and bolts here. You mentioned like job boards at one point. How are you, first of all, like, are you saying, hey, we're going to select the Philippines? That's where we're going to target finding team members from. Do you start like by locating geographically, or, needle in a haystack here? How do you figure out where to go first?
Right. I would say it's useful to pick a single country at first rather than a general region. I think for a lot of agencies, the Philippines is a great place to start out with. Has very high English language skills and comprehension, one of the highest in the world, I think. I looked it up recently. It's something like 20th in the world for countries that speak English as a second language. So you'll find really solid English skills there, which makes it a great place to start out. I mean, I'm very familiar with hiring in the Philippines. We've done it so many times now. There's one site in particular, JobsDB, or onlinejobs.ph. Sorry, I got confused with the Thailand one as well. Onlinejobs.ph is sort of the big jobs board there. In our typical hiring process, there's kind of 3 phases to it. One is we just put that job posting up and see if we hit a home run and there's the perfect candidate just walks in the door, which does happen sometimes, but often it doesn't happen. So if we don't find anyone through just that broad posting on jobs online, we'll go to LinkedIn and post it there as well, and target the Philippines specifically. So there's a lot of people, especially with professional experience, that will be on LinkedIn looking for jobs, and that's a great way to find people. And if we still haven't found anyone, and especially if it's a very skill-specific role, then we'll work with a recruiter, find a headhunting company. And there's a few that we've worked with that have done a really good job for us. But then, of course, you're paying recruiting fees, and it becomes a lot more expensive if that's the road you want to go down. So typically, we'll only do that if it's, say, like a senior developer that we're looking for, or a new SEO manager or something like that, and we haven't found anyone through those other job searches. There are a few recruiting companies that, I don't know how they do it, but you go talk to them, and like a week later, they have like the perfect candidate for you. And it's like, yeah, how did you do this? I want to know the secret so I can do it myself next time. But I assume they have all their relationships and connections, and that's how they run their business.
Yeah.
So that's how I would approach it. Is there's kind of, you can keep digging deeper and deeper and getting more specific to find that right person as the first place to go, and finding those candidates that come in the door. Another piece of advice I would say for someone who's just starting out with their first offshore hire is to pick a role that is more process oriented rather than critical thinking oriented. And I think partly because it's just so much easier to keep track of what that team member is doing once they come on board. They have a set sort of do these tasks throughout the day, answer these tickets, whatever it might be. And if you're not used to working across time zones and overseas, it's a lot easier for you to feel comfortable. Okay, I can see work getting done. It just sort of builds that confidence of this person's actually doing work for me, even though I don't see them in my office, I can see the task being done and everything's okay, rather than sort of like a ambiguous problem-solving, critical thinking role where some of their time might just be spent figuring out deep problems where they have to go disappear for a few hours and so are they doing anything? When are they going to get back to me? And so that's a good approach to take that first step. I would say that there is a little bit of a stigma for any country that you're looking overseas, is that you'll often find people say that you'll only find doers there. You'll only find process-oriented team members and not those critical thinkers. I think that's completely wrong. We have department managers, we have managers who are managing managers that we've found overseas and are very talented and are great at what they do. It just takes time to build up to that, and that comes a lot through referrals and other things. So yeah, that's where I would start things out, but you can sort of graduate to bigger roles as you go on.
Sure. And I think that, again, we're mimicking a lot of the traditional job hiring process, right? Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of when I had my small business going, the first thing I was hiring people to handle was just really mundane tasks that I didn't need to be focused on. I needed to do the bigger picture or the, prospecting, finding new clients, and just being able to give somebody a set of tasks to be able to knock out for me was exactly what I was looking for. And so, it sounds like you don't need to start from scratch with your hiring process. It's, utilize what you've used before, but now you're doing it in a more remote situation.
Exactly.
One thing that comes up, and we've mentioned it a few times here, is cultural fit. And, both culture in terms of what you're used to, right? What you grew up with and, the way that people talk and what you eat for food. But then there's also the culture of your company, and making sure that the hire is a good alignment for that. That seems to me, that's a quagmire, right? Is, wow, how to get that to work? What are some examples where, maybe you've identified it's not a good cultural fit, or it is a good cultural fit? There's some examples you can give in a general sense of those scenarios.
Definitely. I think one common thing that we've found, and a lot of other agencies who have worked overseas have found, is that there's a lot less directness in communication. So everyone's a little more apprehensive to point out issues or question what a decision that's being made or raise a problem or share their thoughts. Some of that, I think, comes from sort of societal culture, but some of it comes from, I think, previous work experience of these team members, that a lot of businesses in Southeast Asia in particular are run from a very authoritarian perspective, where the boss is the boss, you do what I say, you don't question it, just do the work. And so we've had team members come on board, we'll have a team meeting and we'll say, what does everybody think about this? And it's just crickets, nobody wants to say anything. Or there's an issue sort of bubbling beneath the surface and the manager doesn't know about it until it explodes and it obviously becomes a huge issue. And then we'll say, why didn't anybody tell us about this? Why didn't you say anything? So, I didn't want to bother you. You were so busy, whatever that might be. So that can be really frustrating to experience because in Western culture, not that Westerners are super confrontational, but there's a little more comfort when it comes to questioning your boss or saying, hey, here's a big problem, we need to address it or it's going to become a major issue. So we've had to figure out ways to kind of grow that culture within our business and within our team members. Yeah. We're luckily at a point now where new hires come on board and the culture is we're big enough where the culture takes care of itself. It doesn't take that sort of hands-on approach so much anymore. But it definitely will for people starting out. And some of the things we've done are like team meeting will have a required sharing section and everybody knows what's going to be asked ahead of time, and so they can think about it and prepare. But sometimes it'll say, what's one thing you did really well this week, and what's one mistake you made this week? Because we also want them to get comfortable sharing those mistakes and realizing that they're not going to get in trouble if they raise their hand and say, hey boss, I kind of screwed this up and can you come in and help me? We want to get in their heads that it's not a problem for you to say you made a mistake. Mistakes happen and it's okay. Yeah. So we've sort of built in some of that sharing into how we run our team meetings, which gets people used to it. I think the other really important thing for managers or leaders to do is to try to build a genuine rapport with your overseas team members. And when you're having a one-on-one with them, don't just talk about work stuff, but try to be open and vulnerable about your life. Tell some stories about what's happening in your life at the moment. Ask what's happening in their life outside of work, because they will often come in having this picture of you're the big bad boss, and they don't want to upset you or they don't want to bother your time because they know you're busy. And so you want to make yourself very approachable so that when they do have something to say and they do have an issue they want to raise, they're comfortable coming to you knowing that you're not going to blow up at them and yell at them or anything like that. So I think building that habit and routine and rapport of it's okay to share, it's okay to tell me I'm making a bad decision and I'm an idiot for doing it, all of that's okay. I want you to say that stuff, but you have to work at building that habit into your team members.
Okay, and it, while I'm hearing you there in terms of getting people to speak up, it seems like getting a sense of ownership is also maybe something to try and instill. Is that something that you think about and approach your various employees with?
Definitely. That's something that we're always thinking about and working on. I think an employee, whether they're overseas or local, that feels ownership over the work that they do is going to be way more engaged, way more enthusiastic about the work that they're getting done. And again, maybe we should keep a tally of how many times I'm going to say this today. When you treat your team members like real team members and give them the opportunity to take ownership of their own tasks and they're not being micromanaged because you're afraid they're overseas and they're not doing work. Like when you can build that trust and let them say, okay, you are responsible for running this process going forward. Yeah, they'll definitely be more engaged and more receptive to pointing out issues because they know it's on them to make sure that process is running smoothly.
All right, so I'm just checking the notes here. Treat employees as though they're people? Okay, all right. We'll
a novel idea.
Very. This is I don't know. We'll see if that takes off. We're moving along here. We're 38 minutes in, and I appreciate all of your time, and this has been really insightful. Are there any like exact examples or case studies that you have where you had maybe a new project that required you to scale up the team, and like you said, you're moving into Central South America now. Do you have any like examples of a project comes in, okay, hey, we need to bring some people on, and then what is that process looking like?
So you mean sort of like our team member onboarding process kind of thing when we're bringing someone on to help with a project?
Sure.
Yeah, I would say the first 1 to 2 weeks are really important to, again, making that team member feel like they're a part of the company. So typically what we'll do is there'll be a couple of levels of things. Of course, they'll have a meeting with our HR team just to go over company policies and sort of expectations around that. They'll meet with their manager and just kind of outline. We'll definitely have a 1 to 2 week plan of here's your training, here's the tasks we want you to take care of in the first 2 weeks, here are all the people you need to meet and talk to. And then I think one really important thing is that we'll often connect them with like a buddy sort of thing, someone who's not their manager, but someone that can have sort of, at least for the first few weeks, have a regular one-on-one with them. And I think that helps them feel like, okay, I'm making a friend within the company, that this person is not my boss and they're here to help and I can chat with them. It also gives them this outlet to ask any questions that they might be too embarrassed to ask their manager. Maybe they know their manager told them this already, so they're a little embarrassed to go back and say, hey, I forgot this, or I wasn't listening. They can go to their buddy and say, hey, what am I supposed to do when I request time off, or whatever question they want to ask is. So I think that's an important step there. And from there, it's just sort of a lot of training, a lot of shadowing with other team members who sort of, our process is get your training done, shadow and watch another team member do it while another team member watches you, do it on your own and have a team member check it. And then sort of you graduate to each step of the way, you're getting more and more trust into how things are done.
Okay.
I think a lot of that onboarding is really important to getting them ingrained within the culture very quickly. Oftentimes I'll have calls with our new hires as well and just talk about Pronto history and sort of they know how we got to where we are today and all that kind of stuff. So they can get caught up on sort of the background and why we are the way we are and what our culture is and the expectations I have for team members, all that kind of stuff. And of course, it's potentially overwhelming for a new hire to be bombarded with all of that. But that's why we have those outlets. They have one-on-ones with their manager and with their buddy. There's always a place to connect with someone and ask a question or get clarification on something that they weren't sure about.
Excellent. So yeah, always getting a little assistance for drinking from that fire hose, whenever you start a new job. One thing that, is going through my head here is how do you differentiate or work with when you need to just bring in a contractor or a freelancer for a project and then, maybe that person transitions and becomes full-time or, how do you deal with those situations or do you ever have, freelancer or contract situations?
Yeah, we definitely do. We always have a small percentage of our work going out to freelancers and contractors, mostly because we'll sometimes get a little extra work and it doesn't make sense. It's not enough work to hire another full-time person. So there's always a little overflow that's going to freelancers. Just a much more efficient way until that work builds up and we say, okay, let's hire someone and bring them in-house. We always prefer when we can to have someone in-house. We like having those team members and making sure they get the full benefits of being a team member and all of that. When we work with contractors, I would say that the different part of it is like we're handing them a discrete task usually. It's not this sort of open, here's generally what you need to do. We need you to write a certain number of blog articles every month. We need you to help build this particular page on a site. And it's sort of, here's this one thing, we think it's going to take this number of hours, here's the hourly rate that we'll pay, that sort of stuff. Outside of that, they have a lot of flexibility to do, sort of figure out when they work, how they want to work on it. As long as they hit our deadline, we're not trying to control any aspect of how they work, as opposed to our team members, we say, these are the tools you're using, this is when we want to see you online, all that sort of stuff that comes along with you have obligations to our customers and other team members, and that's why you got to be available when we want you available, as opposed to a freelancer. It's just sort of like, here's your deadline, get these blog articles done by this date so we can send them off to our client.
Excellent. Thanks for the clarification there. At the beginning, you mentioned that you also now offer Pronto services as a white label for other agencies. Nesting dolls and just going one more. Talk to me a little bit more about how that works and how other agencies have approached you and how does that integration work between agencies?
Yeah, it's been interesting to grow this new part of our business and sort of explore working with other agencies, and it's worked really well so far. I think for us, the way we've always looked at Pronto is that we are great at the execution side of marketing, of building the site, of managing the site, running the campaign, but we have never really developed this deep strategic service or anything like that. So that's where we fit in really well with, say, like fractional CMOs or other agencies that do focus on higher level strategy and planning, and we can go execute on that campaign. Typically, the way that it will work is that an agency comes in, they get assigned an account manager. We talk a little bit about what their needs are. Do they need more help on the website side of things? Do they need help running specific marketing campaigns? And then we have white label pricing for all of those things. So in theory, an agency could offer almost all the same services that we offer, but at a white label level, and we've reduced our prices so they get a cut and can make sure they make a profit off of whatever they mark up to their clients, and sort of build their own services around our execution. I would say that, yeah, we work best with that agency that can really manage the relationship and the strategy for the end client and then queue up work for us. And we manage all of that through our project management tools. So there's always insight into the agency can see what we're working on, how many hours it's taking, all that kind of stuff, and has a lot of clarity on what we're up to and where their money is going and all that sort of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So you're adding that extra layer of, you're already this remote organization that's come together, and now you're interfacing with another agency, and I can just, I can sense in some ways there's a lot of challenges, but also a lot of relief for those agencies to be able to just package up the work that they need done, hand that off to you all, and then get it back in a timely fashion.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of think of white label work kind of like I was saying about always having freelancers available too, that it might be at a time where you're not quite ready to hire a full-time person to run that SEO campaign or that Google Ads campaign, and it makes a lot more sense to outsource it to an agency who has built that process and has affordable pricing for those services, because we've built it all overseas. But it can also just be a temporary thing that you come on board, we help you get through this point and you grow. And if you want to bring it in-house one day, that's totally fine for you to do. But we're here, we've gone through that process of hiring overseas and know what the challenges that a lot of agencies face. So yeah, I think it can be a relief to say, okay, I know I can hand it over to Tim and Pronto Marketing, and they have the team members who are capable, experienced, they have a whole management structure, all those sorts of things to make sure the work gets done, so I don't have to stress myself out over that, and I can just focus on what I enjoy doing and the aspects of my agency that I think are more important.
Excellent. As far as your business is concerned, how much of it is the white label service versus your regular marketing services at this point?
It's still a really small amount. I would have to do, if I can do some quick math in my head, just like maybe less than 10% of our revenue. We've only been doing white label for about a year and a half now, so it's growing. But I mean, our company was already had 1,000 customers prior to doing that, so there's a lot of room to grow there before it takes over a large portion of our revenue.
Sure.
So yeah, we're starting to get team members dedicated to white label, account managers dedicated to it, building out our processes, and it's been going really well with the agencies that have come on board already, and have seen some good results for their clients and have gotten along really well with our team to make sure everything's getting done for them.
Absolutely. Great. I think maybe one last thing to touch on here is HR, legal aspects of running the business, the things that nobody wants to really think about or talk about, but are absolutely critical, especially, once you're getting to the scale that Pronto's at. Are there any tools that you found that are helpful, or, is there any tips or tricks for dealing with local regulations and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, we've used HR information systems for a long time, using Bamboo HR at the moment, but switching to a new tool called Omni HR, which is actually developed in Southeast Asia and built for the Southeast Asian market. So that's, I mean, you just need a system like that to keep all your employees together and all that information ready to go. In terms of the legal side of things, I'll say that I'm not a lawyer, but I will explain my knowledge of it. I mean, the 100% safest way to do it is to establish your own business entity in the country you're hiring in. But that comes with a ton of hoops to jump through. And when we started hiring in the Philippines, it's expensive, took a long time. COVID delayed things for us. It took forever before we could actually get that set up and bring those employees on directly. If you're not ready, I wouldn't recommend going through that as you're starting off. We did that once it became really clear to us, like, okay, we're investing in building a team in this place. But there's lots, especially in the Philippines, and you can find a bunch in Central and South America as well. A lot of BPOs who will outsource team members to you. Essentially, they become the employer of record locally and are officially the employer of that person. but they are contracted out to you full time. And so they, for all intents and purposes, they are your team member working only for you.
Okay.
That makes it a lot easier. You don't have to worry about, okay, what holidays do I give them? What local labor laws do I need to follow? And that sort of stuff. The local employer of record will take care of that for you. I would say the downside there is that you don't have total control over sort of the culture of that employer of record. For example, we used to use one in the Philippines when we started out, and that company was very strict about having team members clock in right on time, and their pay would get docked if they were even a few minutes late. And we're sort of like, hey, that's not the way we want to run things, and we had to go back and forth with them a bunch, like, please don't punish our team members because they were 15 minutes late. That's not what we're trying to do here. And so it was little things like that that led to us saying, okay, we're going to make the investment and start our own business so that we have full control over the culture and how these team members are treated. So there's pros and cons to all of that. I would say working with an outsource agency like that, a talent agency, will definitely make things easier, especially when you're starting out. But there's some different avenues to explore once you've gotten a little bit further down the road, and if you sort of feel like, okay, we really want them to feel like they're full employees and that they are treated the same as everybody else in the company as well.
Very fascinating. Again, pulling back layers of this onion, things that you don't necessarily want to think about right away, but are absolutely critical, right? You want your employees to make sure that they're paying the taxes so that they're not getting in trouble at the end of the year. I remember being a 1099 years ago and being surprised of, wait, 30% of my money is gone? I didn't save any of it? I'm in trouble here. So I think in some ways it can be getting the cart ahead of the horse to start thinking about all of this at the beginning, but it is something you want to keep in mind as you're progressing into hiring, whether it's offshore or remotely. Anybody outside of your country, there's going to be these additional challenges that can come up, and if you're at least thinking of them ahead of time, it should hopefully prevent a lot of headache later.
Right. I do know some agencies that have hired team members just sort of on a loose contract, and they're not sort of officially reported as an employee anywhere. And I don't think any of those agencies have gotten in trouble, but I think you can't, there is a path where you can get in trouble, that even if you have this sort of freelance contract with them, if they're working full time for you, the local government is going to think, well, they're actually a full-time employee and they deserve severance if you're letting them go, or they deserve health care benefits, or whatever other local benefits they are required to receive. So you can get in trouble with that path. Maybe it's not likely that you get caught, but that's a risk you're taking if you're trying to jump through that path. So I would definitely recommend going through talent outsourcing agency to just make sure you meet all the legal obligations and you don't have to have that worrying in the back of your mind, like what's going to happen one day if someone finds out about this.
Sure. No, I think that's really smart. I think that's very smart. Tim, we're closing in on an hour here. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I really do appreciate you joining me today. I think just from skimming back through kind of what was talked about here is, number one, right, treat employees as people regardless of who they are, where they are, and what they're doing for you.
The message got.
I love it. I think also, really like, and from that follows everything else, right? Like just following through, thinking about is the person going to be a good fit for the company? And, a video interview is a great way to kind of get that started. Having multiple people from the company interview them, again, very similar to how a regular company should do all of its hiring processes. And I think the big wrinkle that everybody needs to make sure they're keeping in mind is local laws and regulations, and just at least being aware of the fact that somebody's in a different country. They might, coming from the U.S., right, health insurance is kind of a big thing, but in some countries, you might not need to worry about that because health insurance is provided. And just thinking about all of that. So really, really fascinating and interesting insights into offshore and remote hiring. I appreciate that, Tim. If somebody is interested in working either for Pronto or with Pronto, what's the best way to get in touch with Pronto and you?
Sure. The easiest way, you can just email me directly. My email is tim@prontomarketing.com. Happy to answer any questions anybody has, or anybody who's interested in learning more about hiring overseas, white label, whether they're a good fit for a role at Pronto, anything like that. Happy to answer those questions via email.
Awesome. And is any social media? Are you guys active on the socials anywhere?
Yeah, I think we're mostly active on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn company page, or my LinkedIn profile I'm checking every day as well. So either of those are okay too.
Excellent. Tim, I thank you again for your time. Great information here. And as always, as a partner with Kinsta, we love working with Pronto. So great to see you, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me on, Roger. This is a lot of fun.
All right. Have a good one.
See ya.